if a man lies with a male as with a woman, both have committed an abomination. They shall surely be put to death. Their blood is
Marriage equality is really inequality for children. Children deserve a mother and a father.
We do not feel that redefining marriage is the best way to tackle the problem
We're
of
all children of a
discrimination.
male and a female, and this must have relevance to our understanding of the way children should be nurtured. Is it time for Christians of conscience to examine the dire consequences if the homosexuals are given access to the sacrament of marriage? That might require a little bit of context. You see, on May 22nd, 2015, there will be a referendum in the Republic of Ireland. The proposed changes to the Irish Constitution are 1. That the age at which you are eligible to run for president is reduced from 35 to 21. 2. Marriage may be contracted in accordance with law by two persons without distinction as to their sex. The majority of the quotes which I used at the start of this video come from various opponents of this proposed change, from the Iona Institute, to the Evangelical Alliance Ireland, to the Archbishop Dermot Martin, to an anonymous pamphlet which contained the question, should children be exposed to the sounds of sodomy? Which I assume is a lesser known Simon and Garfunkel song. But note the reoccurring themes: fathers and mothers, the sacrament of marriage, won't somebody please think of the children? Never mind the fact that estranged parents, dead parents, divorce, all these things have existed for many, many years and prevented many children having traditional parents. But the referendum is not about surrogacy or adoption, it is about allowing people to marry without distinction as to their sex. Which brings me to the point of this video. Today we're going to talk about historically young presidents. Obviously not. You've seen the title of the video. We're talking about same-sex unions. The people I quoted at the start of this video would prescribe to the tradition as laid down by the Abrahamic religions. That is, that marriage is between a man and a woman and the purpose is procreation. But same-sex relationships have existed for centuries. Legalized same-sex marriage is a rather new concept. The first ever bill about same-sex marriage was passed, surprisingly enough, by the Netherlands in 2001. But here's the thing, when it comes to the traditions of the Abrahamic religions, and here I am talking specifically about the Judeo-Christian side of things, it's not that old, really. The first books of the Torah weren't composed till the 16th century BC, and work didn't begin on the book of Leviticus, the one I quoted way back at the beginning of this video, until around the 6th century BC. And there were cultures which accepted same-sex relationships that existed prior to the writing of the book of Leviticus and the first books of the Bible. You also have to take into account the people who wrote these books and where they came from. They came from a tradition which had escaped Egypt, and their laws were a reaction, in part, to what was going on in Egypt, as well as the fact they needed to start a new society, so they kind of wanted people having babies. So if you consider that the Israelites were reacting against the things that went on in Egypt, you have to ask yourself, did the Egyptians have same-sex relationships? And the answer to that is maybe. It's hard to tell with ancient Egypt because they didn't really leave us a lot of written down laws, but there is a theory. It has been suggested that Khnum and Khnumhotep, 5th dynasty courtiers, were lovers because they were buried together, and they're depicted in their tomb holding hands, embracing, and touching noses. The other theory is that they are either conjoined twins, very, very close, or just plain old normal twins. The possibility is there that these men were not only lovers, but they were approved of. And if you see the laws and morals of the Israelites as a reaction against society of Egypt, well, that suggests that same-sex relationships were allowed in that society. While that's not 100% provable, if we look at the laws in Mesopotamia, things get rather interesting. The Mesopotamians had strict laws governing marriage, but none of the laws, including the Code of Hammurabi, had any laws restricting same-sex marriage. The Code of Hammurabi was written around the 18th century BC, which is long before either Leviticus or Deuteronomy. To add to that, King Zimri Limoth of Mari and Hammurabi of Babylon himself both had male lovers. Furthermore, Hittite laws seem to suggest that male slaves, if they could afford it, could marry other male slaves. Therefore, if that society allowed male slaves to get married, then the Hittites must have been cool with same-sex marriage. Also, the Mesopotamians not only had prayers about male and female love, but the love between two men. So far we're seeing that in ancient Egypt, it's possible same-sex relationships were allowed. Also, we're seeing that in Mesopotamia, same-sex relationships did happen, and same-sex marriage could have been a thing. Now we're going to look at the Greeks and the Romans, so literally forget everything you ever knew about sexuality, because they didn't think of things like we do. The Greeks had no concept of gay or straight. Sexual orientation in ancient Greece relied more on gender, age, and social status. As a result, you can't say that there were either heterosexuals or homosexuals in ancient Greece or Rome. To have had a sexual preference in those societies would have been considered, well, queer. In Greece, girls entered into marriage around the age of 14 to 16, and boys around the same age could enter into relationships with older men. And they actually had more rights than the girls. I should point out that these relationships weren't marriages, nor were they necessarily sexual in nature. The older males were meant to act as mentors to the younger ones until such time as the younger ones could grow full beards. At that point, they would then go and get married, but they could maintain a friendship with their older BBFF. A young girl would essentially be married off after an arrangement between her father and the suitor. However, the males, 1, had to be able to give consent because there were laws, 2, had to be courted, and 3, normally had slaves to protect them from unwanted suitors. Because of the patriarchal nature of Greek society, a fully bearded Greek adult male had to be the dominant person in the relationship, so generally there were not many adult males in same-sex relationships with each other. That said, Pausanias of Athens and the poet Agathon, and Alexander the Great and his general Hephaestion are examples of adult males who were in same-sex relationships. The Roman attitude towards sexuality was kind of like the Greek, except if you weren't Roman, because if a Roman got involved with a foreigner, it seems that all bets were off. The Emperor Hadrian had a 5-year relationship with a Blythian named Antonius. Antonius would appear in public with Hadrian and his wife, and when Antonius killed himself, possibly due to the fact he felt he was getting too old for Hadrian, Hadrian was so distraught that he made Antonius a god, built temples in his honor, named a city after him, and named a star after him as well. And there are documented references to same-sex marriages in ancient Rome. The poets Martial and Juvenal talk about same-sex marriage. They're not necessarily approving of it, but they do say it happened. Martial, for example, recalls the bearded Callistraeus marrying the rugged After. Further examples of same-sex marriage in ancient Rome come from none other than an emperor. The Emperor Nero married at least 2 men, possibly 3. It is known that Nero married a man named Pythagoras, to which he was the bride, and he was also the groom to another man named Sporus. I know I'm not mentioning a lot of women here, but unfortunately we're talking about some patriarchal societies, and women don't get much of a look in. Unless you're Sappho. Hi, Sappho! When Christianity came to ancient Rome, that drew a dividing line between the sexes. By the time we get to medieval society, homosexuality is seen as unnatural, and the writings of people like Thomas Aquinas really underline that entire idea, which echoes down to today. But we have seen that in Mesopotamia, Greece, Rome, and possibly Egypt, same-sex relationships happen, and there is some suggestion that same-sex marriages also took place. And that isn't to mention the Nandi people of East Africa, where female husbandry is a thing, where women can take on the male role in a marriage, or the intimate female relationships between women in Lesotho, or in the Fujian province in China during the Ming Dynasty, where same-sex marriages took place. In this video, I've attempted to show that tradition is not universal, that it can change from culture to culture, from century to century. I'm straight. I can get married if I want, and I can get all the rights and privileges that come with that. But in this country, LGBT people cannot. And that isn't fair. In the 21st century, we should make a new tradition. We should make marriage equality our new tradition. Thank you.